So I want to circle back to all of this, having set the table. But there are other things that if I don't tell you about, you may not find out about them. And one of them just concluded. The budget director for Trump is Mick Mulvaney. He's a former member of the Congress, of the House. He's a Tea Party type. He's a good guy. I have met the budget director, Mulvaney. I liked him very much. He just had a press conference announcing the details of the Trump budget. And I heard him say things that you just don't hear said in Washington explaining budgets. He said that this budget, the Trump budget, is a taxpayer-first budget. That I don't recall that ever having been used as an approach to budgeting. Taxpayer first. It's a balanced budget. It's the first balanced budget in decades. Mulvaney says that if the Trump budget is adopted, it will result in sustained 3% economic growth. And that's the foundation. Mulvaney says that without 3% growth, we cannot have entrepreneurism. 1.9% economic growth is not enough growth to spur the risk-taking involved in entrepreneurism, which is one of the building blocks of a growing American economy. We need people taking risk. We need there to be the reality that there is a payoff at the other end for taking the risk, that there is a successful outcome if you do. He said we can't get there at 1.9% economic growth. That's stagnation, essentially. We need 3% economic. Now, the CBO has scored this thing. They say that we won't get to 3% growth until when? 2027 or some such thing? I don't remember the number, just read the number. But regardless, they're very pessimistic on even getting a 3% growth. That is outrageous. This country ought to be growing at 4% sustained. I understand Mulvaney shooting for 3 based on where we are, but Obama never had anything over 1.5% economic growth in 8 years. You couple that with rising taxes and rising Obamacare health insurance premiums and deductible costs, it's no wonder nobody was getting ahead. The Trump people are trying to fix it. They're trying to address it. 3% sustained economic growth. He said it's a normal range for the country for decades until Obama came along. And it was. Economic growth routinely was in the 3 to 3.5%, sometimes 4.5% range until Obama came along. And all that came to a screeching halt. Mulvaney said that if you are 30 years old, you have never had a job in a healthy economy. And if you're 30 years old, you don't know what a healthy economy is, yet you're being told that we're in one. And you were told for 8 years of Obama that we're in a roaring recovery and we got a booming economy going on out there. And people who have nothing in their lives to compare that to, imagine what their attitudes on the U.S. economy and activity must be. They don't know wild optimism. They don't know sustained economic growth. They've never seen it. It's never happened while they've been alive. And that matters because most people's historical perspective begins the day they were born. That's when history matters. Anything before that's old fogey time, and they're not interested. It's everybody. Every generation is that way. You have to fight that. You have to try to learn history. Every generation thinks things are happening that have never happened before. Every generation has people thinks we're in the last days. Every generation is filled with pessimists. But when you have the millennial generation, of majority of which have never had a job, you might even be able to put the period there, have never had a job, period, or never had a job in a healthy economy. Yet, what have they been told? They've been lied to. Obama and his boys told them everything was just great. We got a roaring economy. We're adding jobs left and right. We got the sustainable energy, renewable energy, green energy, got all that wind and solar. They have been so misled and lied to about what real economic growth is. No wonder their expectations are so low. They don't know anything else. No wonder they're still living with mommy and daddy at age 36. They don't know anything else. Mulvaney I think properly pointed out, people do not know or have forgotten what it's like to have healthy 3% growth in the economy. Well, for those of you who haven't been alive, I can tell you I have. And Mulvaney is exactly right. If the economy right now is growing at 1.4 or 1.5%, you double that. I guarantee you that kind of economic activity is impossible to ignore. You see it where you live. You'll see it reflected on the news. You'll see it everywhere. Jobs are being created at 3% growth. Entrepreneurism is healthy. Wages are increasing. People are going about the business of creating wealth and accruing wealth for themselves. It's a huge, huge percent. Imagine economic growth 100% greater than it is today, from 1.5% to 3%. I don't mean double the GDP. I mean the rate of growth. Double that? Nobody could escape it. Nobody would have any excuse for not noticing it. And that's what Mulvaney is pointing out. So he said that the priorities in the Trump budget are border security, law enforcement, veterans, school choice, and parental leave. And he insisted they're going to build the wall. He said, I don't care what people are telling you or what you're hearing, we are going to build the wall. Everything in this budget fulfills a Trump campaign promise. What Mulvaney has done here on matters economic is put the Trump campaign's promises on paper. And for you seasoned citizens, nothing in the budget touches Social Security or Medicare, because Trump promised that he would not. The budget doesn't. And Mulvaney used a line that I first heard used by Jack Kemp. I could probably try to tell you it was my line, because many of you don't know who Jack Kemp is. Well, most of you do, but some of you wouldn't. But Jack Kemp used the line. I've always attributed it every time I've used it since. He said, we in the United States do not measure compassion by how many people are receiving federal welfare or benefits. We measure and define compassion by the number of people who no longer need it, who have become self-sufficient and self-reliant. Jack Kemp, and somebody may have said it before he did, but he was the first. I've said it was a good press conference from Mick Mulvaney. I know presidents' budgets always get changed. The Congress does the budget. I understand all that. But I wanted to get this mentioned to you off the top here before we get mired in the weeds on all this other stuff, because you're not going to hear about this today. And it's the reason Trump was elected. These things are among the top 2 or 3 reasons Trump was elected. And I just think it important that everybody know that they're working on these things and that Mulvaney is toiling away at it at his press conference today to announce their objectives. Let me take a time out. We'll come back and we'll get back into this other stuff, too. So Monica Lewinsky, too. This is unreal what she's done. President Trump and his entourage have just touched down in Rome. It's about a 3.5-hour flight, 3:45 from Tel Aviv to Roma. Rome is 6 hours ahead of us. Tel Aviv 7. Tel Aviv in Saudi Arabia. So right now it's 6:25 p.m. in Rome. A couple more things here on the budget today, as announced by Mulvaney, departmental-wise. The Trump budget expands Homeland Security by 7%, the VA by 6%, and the defense budget, Pentagon, plus 5%. Here are the departments that will be cut if the Trump budget ever were to become law. The Department of Justice, 4% cut. Department of Energy, 6% cut. The Department of the Interior, an 11% cut. Housing and Urban Development, a 13% cut. Department of Transportation, 13% cut. Department of Education, 14% cut. Health and Human Services, 16% cut. Department of Labor, a 20% cut. Department of Agriculture, 21% cut. The State Department would see its budget cut by 29%. And the big winner, as far as we're concerned, the EPA would have a 31% budget cut. This is a dream come true if this were to happen. This is precisely what this country has needed for the longest time. And there hasn't been a Republican in my lifetime since Ronaldus Magnus who has approached this, either in rhetoric or in deed. And the caterwauling here over the, for example, Labor Department, Education Department, 14% cut. Agriculture, there's going to be a lot of pushback on that. Of course, the EPA at 31%. This is what's needed. This is precisely what's needed. This drains the swamp. This reduces the size of this bloated bureaucracy and the deep state that it contains. And I wanted to mention this off the top because I actually thought if I got started and left this for later, I might not get to it. And this is among the many reasons Trump was elected. And I think it's helpful for all of you Trumpists to know that his budget director is moving forward on all of this.